Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. The first vehicle I decided to spade in this new update was the T1E1 90mm. The reason for this is because it was going to be the vehicle I was going to enjoy the most. I already decided before the update, since it was so similar to the standard T1E1, and I've got to be honest, I had a really good time in that one, and this time in this one was pretty good as well. I had a really nice time playing it. It is definitely not in as good of a position as the other T1E1, but it's still in a fantastic position because of its matchmaking. So the difference between this vehicle and the other T1E1 is basically this one has a bigger gun. There are some armor changes, but the armor changes don't matter. You still get hammered by whatever shoots you. This is not a classic heavy tank. This is not something that you should rely on its armor. This is a medium tank at the end of the day. That's the way that you have to play it. So understand that the vast majority of stuff you're going to face, they're just going to pen right through you. Sometimes you'll get lucky, especially if somebody hits the turret cheeks, since they are quite slanted, so they might not go through, and against autocannons you'll be able to stop them, but most targets shooting you through the front will be able just to go straight through you. And also this thing has that wonderful angled armor on the side of it, which basically means no matter how you angle, there is always a weak spot that the enemy can shoot at. So you cannot rely on the armor. So you can't go front up against stuff like Tigers, Tiger 2s, or even if you get mixed matchmaking and face stuff like T-34s, for example, or if you face the Soviet IS-2. That's not really your job. Instead, what this thing is it's a vehicle that you play with the mediums, and you go on flanks to be able to get around the heavy tanks and then hammer them from the side and take them out very easily with the 90mm gun. That does mean that while you're spading it, it's a little bit harder to do, since it is a little bit chunky, but once you get the engine upgrades, you're able to move around and do pretty good with it, which is, you know, what you want to do. So, talking about the stock experience of this thing, it's not exactly fantastic. It has a standard AP shot for its 90mm, which actually does do quite a lot of spalling, surprisingly. And then also, you get a standard AP for the 37mm, which is your secondary on the vehicle. Now, the only useful thing I found the 37 for was obviously finishing off lighter targets that were around, and also the other part of it was actually using it as a ranging shot, because the muzzle velocities of the standard rounds that you actually take in this thing are pretty close. So that means that if you don't trust your rangefinder, you can always trust the secondary 37 round and then fire for the 90, because since this thing is a 90, it has a bit longer reload than the standard 76 that you find around these BRs. Now, the good thing about the stock grind of this is the two shells that you want to research. So the M82 for the 90mm, which has more pen and also more explosive mass, so it does more damage, that's at rank 1. And then the M51 B1, which is the capped shell for the 37, so it gives it a little bit more penetration, and basically the same everything else. So that is also a rank 1. So the very useful modifications for this vehicle you get straight away, so you don't have to worry about your capability to do offensive damage. So then all you have to worry about is your mobility, and you can focus on that in all of the other areas. I find this gun surprisingly stable, even though it doesn't have a stabilizer, and that might be because of the platform, it might be because of the fact that it's quite fat, so it's quite slow moving around, but I didn't really have any issues going on the move and going around the place. So the major issue I had is if I, well, cocked up a shot, what would end up happening is I would have 2 or 3 firing back at me, and that would make problems for the vehicle. But since I was playing it more not as a heavy tank but more as a medium, I was able to use the transmission pretty effectively to get in and get out of the areas. The transmission is one where it goes forwards at the same rate as it goes backwards, so you can set up for a shot fire and then remove yourself from that position. It's super useful if you're trying to use this as kind of like more of a TD style, and it can work very, very well. This thing also has good gun depression. It is tall though, so that kind of counters it, but it still means you can get shots on target. The only problem I've actually had with any of the kind of offensive armament of this thing is the top 50 cal on the T1E190. The one which is mounted on the commander's cupola, it is mounted very low on the cupola. So if you actually want to aim it upwards to go after aircraft, which is pretty much what you would use it for, you can't really in a very positive way. It actually is, its angles of fire are very, very shallow because of the fact it's mounted so low. I would actually prefer it to have a taller mount if I wanted to use it in that way. The other 50 cals as well are kind of useless, unless, you know, you run into an AA target or something that won't really do anything. And also, as I said, the 37mm I didn't see too much use for, apart from as a ranging thing. But that 90 kicked, you know, it did well. It was able to penetrate anything I needed it to. There was hardly any times where I ended up missing a shot because of it. It was fantastic, and I felt really nice about the gun. The other part of it is the lineup. The 5.7 lineup has always been fantastic for America. People always talk about the Jumbo and how the Jumbo is over-tiered and how it's in a bracket where it doesn't really fit. And that's fair, you know, I can get that, especially when you look at certain other nations like Germany and see what they have at their BRs. But at 5.7 for America, you have the 76 Sherman, which is a completely fine vehicle with a stabilized 76. You have the M36 B2, which is an insanely powerful vehicle. Especially as a first spawn. As a tank destroyer, you have a lot of CAS elements that you can bring along too, and also you have some premiums. Unfortunately, they ended up moving up the Hellcat because it was too strong to 6.0, so that kind of sucks. And also, one of the big problems with the 5.7 lineup is 6.7 exists. An American 6.7 is very strong, so is Germany's 6.7. And if you get fully up-tiered in the T1E1 there, you do actually have the gun to deal with, you know, the enemies you're going to run into, but you're at a significant disadvantage because you're a heavy and because you don't have any, like, additional stuff on top of it. So there was a few matches where I got fully up-tiered, and I had to kind of wait for the battle to take place in certain areas, play defensive, pick off targets, and then push forward, instead of being able to play the aggressive kind of power position / flanking role, which was working out for me so well. Now, this vehicle was, as I said, quite easy to research. It was quite easy to get through. I wouldn't say I had a bad time in it. I ended up going 42 ground kills, 9 deaths in 11 battles, so I ended up dying in most of them, but we're going at a 4-1 there, which I'd say is pretty good, and 73% win rate. So did very well, 8 victories out of 11, and the major reason was because in this thing I was just nuking out certain areas. Now I can get why people would get frustrated with this vehicle. It's a big box that's easy to pen. It has a few issues in terms of, you know, being a heavy tank, but if you don't see it as a heavy tank and you just see it as kind of like a slow medium, if you play it like that, you'll have a fantastic time. The good thing about it as well, in its tech tree position, before you play this one, you'll play the T1E1, which in my opinion is a slightly better experience because of its matchmaking, because it takes away that 6-7 era that you can get into, and you'll be used to the T1E1 by the time you play this one, and you'll have a fantastic time. As always though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.